Colonel, we've gotten some odd comments that have been floating around in the news lately, statements by Secretary of Defense Austin, by NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, and by Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley. I'd like to run them. We'll run them separately so that you can comment on them. Before I do, just a couple of general questions. My understanding, and of course you're the world-class tank commander, is that tanks, you don't want to run tanks in mud. Wouldn't you want to run them in the winter when the earth is cold? And if so, wouldn't now be the time for tanks, because the muddy season will be there in another month? Do I have that right?
Well, I think that's right. It would be preferable to go sooner rather than later.
Preferable for both sides, preferable for the Russians that are using tanks, and preferable for the Ukrainians that want to use the American, well, the American tanks haven't arrived, but the German tanks, which are either on their way or there.
Well, right now, the Germans are providing 17 tanks, 3 from Portugal, 14 from Germany. That's not a significant number. They initially said they would end up with 88. That number continues to fall. I think for the Ukrainians, the mud would be a welcome respite.
Okay. Secretary Austin recently reinforced the Joe Biden mantra, will be with you as long as it takes and will get you as much ammo as you need. He's a little long-winded, but here he is.
Ukraine has been at this for a year, and so they have used a lot of artillery ammunition. We're going to do everything we can, working with our international partners, to ensure that we give them as much ammunition as quickly as possible.
As much ammunition as quickly as possible. I suppose that's so generic it could mean almost anything. But is there still enthusiasm, Colonel, as you perceive it from your sources, amongst the neocons on Capitol Hill to provide as much ammunition as possible? Or do they see the handwriting on the wall that you've been warning about for a year?
I think they see the handwriting on the wall. But having said that, it's not a question of willingness at this stage. We simply don't have much ammunition to send. We've reached the point where we're rapidly running out of ammunition in our war stocks, and our factories cannot gear up fast enough to produce more at a desired rate. We don't have a surge capacity that we had 50 years ago. It doesn't exist for missiles, rockets, anything. So I think they're going to get something more than they've gotten, but not much. And it's not going to make much difference. On the other hand, as we've talked about before, the Russians, and I just had a conversation with someone who was in Moscow a couple of days ago, who tells me that the Russian General Staff is preparing for a 30-month war against NATO and the United States. All of their munitions factories, equipment factories are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they are well stocked and they are prepared for the worst.
Well, guess who agrees with you on the depletion of our supplies? The Secretary General of NATO, General Stoltenberg. Here he is now.
The war in Ukraine is consuming an enormous amount of ammunition and depleting Allied stockpiles. The current rate of Ukraine's ammunition expenditure is many times higher than our current rate of production. This puts our defense industries under strain.
I wish that Secretary Austin had been there. Maybe he was somewhere else in the room. But the current rate, I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to think I memorized it. The current rate of Ukraine use is not twice, not 3 times. It's many times our ability to supply them. What does that tell you? It tells me that soon the Ukrainians will have nothing because NATO will have nothing with which to supply them. If you make $10 a day and you spend $15 a day, sooner or later, you have no cash.
Yes, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. There's no question about it. And they'll have to fall back and regroup. If they don't, they'll simply be annihilated. And that might not even work either. We'll talk about that later. But the bottom line is, yes, the situation is dire. And the more desperate things become, the more ridiculous, in some cases, the claims are made by the Ukrainians and the West.